Now, the West is, of course, trying to step up its pressure on Moscow over the invasion into Ukraine. The United States has announced more sanctions, and this time, the targets happen to be Russia's defense industry and its ally Belarus. In response to Belarus's support of the Russian war, the White House has now unveiled some sweeping restrictions on Belarus to try and choke off the import of technological goods into Belarus. The United States has now announced sanctions that target Russia's defense sector as well, and the curbs will impose some significant costs on Russian weapon development and production companies. Belarus and Russia are very closely linked, and Belarus has been used as a staging ground for the invasion into Ukraine. Washington has so far imposed several rounds of sanctions, including those against Putin and the Russian Central Bank. The top American diplomat Antony Blinken has asserted that the Russian President Vladimir Putin, in fact, has committed some grave miscalculations in the American resolve to halt the Russian war machine. Blinken has said that Putin assumed the United States and its allies were bluffing over imposing sanctions on Russia.
President Putin may have assumed that the United States and our allies were bluffing when we warned of massive, unprecedented consequences. But, as President Biden likes to say, big nations can't bluff. The United States doesn't bluff, and President Putin has gravely miscalculated.
Now, there are also reports of the United States preparing a sanctions package targeting more Russian oligarchs as well as their companies and assets. The U.S. Treasury Department has also issued new guidance to close loopholes, which it said Russia was exploiting to evade the sanctions. Now, the World Bank has announced halting all ongoing projects in Russia and Belarus. The development lender cited that the hostilities against the people of Ukraine is what will make it difficult for Russia to, in fact, access funds in the international markets. The institution has about 11 ongoing projects in Belarus of a total estimated cost of about $1.2 billion. These deals with energy, education and transportation and COVID-19 response as well. With Russia, there are just 4 projects that cost about $370 million, which largely deal with policy issues. The bank has also announced that it is preparing a $3 billion aid package for the war-torn nation of Ukraine. This will include about $350 million in terms of immediate funds. Meanwhile, the IMF is also said to be preparing to provide for emergency assistance to Ukraine. Meanwhile, this, believe it or not, was the scene in Panama City in Panama, where people came out onto the streets. And they've now urged the government to close the Panama Canal for Russian ships as a punishment for the invasion into Ukraine. The move would, of course, be a symbolic one because under a 1977 treaty, the waterway is supposed to remain neutral, even in the case of an international conflict. Notably, Russia is not on the list of the top 15 users of the canal. On the other hand, Venezuela has bucked the global condemnation of Russia's invasion into Ukraine. President Nicolas Maduro has criticized the barrage of Western sanctions that have been slapped on Russia. Russia is a key ally of Maduro's leftist government. It is itself under Western sanctions aimed at forcing Maduro out of power.
Que Occidente ha entrado en histeria, desesperación y locura contra Rusia. Nosotros sí vamos a mantener nuestras relaciones comerciales con Rusia y estamos listos para venderle todo lo que podamos modestamente y todo lo que Rusia necesite comprar. Todo.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.